Hey guys, welcome back to another scripting tutorial. We'll be covering functions today. And don't mind the fact that I'm in the woods right now. I kinda had to take refuge after escaping prison. But enough about me, let's focus on what functions are. And a function is basically a variable that can contain multiple lines of code instead of one line. And the basic structure of a function is function. And then you give any name for what you want the function to be. Opening bracket, closing bracket, hit return, and then you can just do whatever you want in here. Alternatively, you can also write a function more like a variable by doing something like this. So to quickly demonstrate how a function works, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my function name to something that makes more sense, like print message. Then I'm just going to write 3 different prints here, and in order to use the function, what we have to do is we have to type in the name of the function here, and then we put an open bracket, closing bracket, and you can see that if I run the game, it actually prints all 3 messages. Now here's where functions start getting useful. Ideally, if I wanted to print this multiple times, I would basically have to fill up a lot of space in order for this to work. And not to mention that this is not efficient at all. But with functions, if I want to repeat this a bunch of times, all I have to do is just print out the function here. And this not only saves a lot of space, but this is also a lot more efficient in terms of coding. So now hopefully you know what I mean when I say that a function is basically a variable that contains multiple lines of code instead of one line of code. So now I have here 3 parts, each labeled with unique names, part 1, part 2, and part 3. And what I want to do is I want to set them on fire because I'm not in a good mood and I just want to see the world burn. So I'm going to get a script here. So before we do anything in our script, we have to first create a function. And for the name of the function, I'm going to call it burn because that's what we're doing. And in order to create fire, all we have to do is use instance.new like from the last video. And then of course we have to parent it to an object. But now we have a problem. We want to use the burn function on a specific part that we give it. But the only way to do that is if we could pass the part as a variable inside the function. This is when we add parameters to our function. And a parameter is basically a variable that we can pass into the function. And in order to add a parameter, we give the name of the parameter inside here, within the brackets of the function. And if you want to be a little extra, you can also add a colon and then add the data type that you want the parameter to be. As a more old Roblox developer, I don't really use this feature because I didn't hear about it back in my day. But for the sake of the tutorial, I'll use it at least once. So now I'm just going to decide that the name of the parameter will be object to burn, and then the data type should be object since we're looking to pass a part into the function. And then in order to actually use the value inside the parameter, all we have to do is just reference this parameter name just like you would a variable. So I'll just replace here with what we put as the name of the parameter. And finally, in order to actually pass a value into the parameter, all we have to do is put the value we want to pass inside these brackets when we call the function. So in this case, let's say I want to make part 1 burn, and essentially what this is going to do is it's going to define object to burn as the value we passed in here. So in reality, doing this is basically the same as replacing all object to burn with the value that you passed. And you can see that if I run the game, it will actually work here on part 1. Now just a little bit of coding terminology. The specific value that you pass into a parameter is what's called an argument. I personally don't use arguments that much. I prefer to call it just parameters for simplicity. But if you continue to learn how to code and everything, you're probably going to hear the word arguments a bunch more times in the future. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the part turn black when it sets on fire, just like how it would in real life. I'm going to use brick color to do this, and you can see it works easy enough. But now what if I want to use the burn function to also control the color that they burn into so that it's not just black for every single part that's burning? So this is where we introduce a second parameter so we can control for it. For the parameter name, I'm going to call it burn color for simplicity. And this time I'm not going to add a colon just to show people that you can do it without assigning a data type. And then finally, I replaced the brick color.new with the variable burn color. So now in our function, In order to reference the second parameter, I can refer to the next parameter by adding a comma, and then I type in what I want the second parameter to be. So now if I switch the brick color to something else like lime green, you can see that when I run the game, the part gets burnt to lime green. And here you can see that I've got different burn colors for each part, and when I run, it actually changes them. So clearly parameters are very useful, but what if you come across a situation where you have more than 10 parameters and you clearly can't fill all of them out, or it's just too tiring to do so? Well, usually when there's extra parameters that you don't assign a value to, it will normally default to nil. And we can actually use this nil to our advantage, because then we can define the parameter to a default value that we actually want. And the way we do that is we write if not parameter name then, and then we write the default value that we want to set the parameter to. In this case, I want to set the default burn color to black, so I don't have to input brick color black all the time. So in order to do that, I just replace the parameter name with burn color, and then I set the default value to brick color.black. And you can see that if I run the game without fulfilling all the parameters, it'll be black by default. Now I want to talk about another very useful aspect of a function, and that is called return. And what return essentially is for is any value that you put next to the return will basically be the value of the entire function. So if I were to put true here and I printed this function to see what value the function will be, you can see that it actually prints true because that is what I set as the return. And notice how when I delete this return, it gives me nothing because functions don't really have values. Giving a value to the function is really useful, especially when you're trying to calculate something. But one really useful application with the return function is to use functions as conditions for the if statement. So yeah, now that I have my burn function, let's do a little bit of extensive testing. Okay, I might have overdone it a bit, but you know what? That's not really my fault. Because if rich people like Mr. B can get away with massacre, then why should I be the one to blame? And you know what? I don't think this is enough.
We need to do more.
Okay, so I found this plot of land which I used to build a small camp for my regime, and I even made a bunch of posters to go along with it. So later I'm going to have a lot of supporters. Don't ask me how I got them, but I want them to prove their allegiance by wearing this shirt here. You said you like this shirt, right? Good. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to make a script that forces everyone to wear this shirt once they join in. I mean, not like I need to force anyone, but it's just an extra precaution. So once again, I'm going to start by adding a script. And we're going to use an event that I haven't talked about yet, which is the player added event, which is an event for game.players. And what the player added event does is it listens for any time a player joins the game, or any time the player is added, which if you guys didn't know is this object right here. And the reason why I haven't talked about player added yet is because player added is a special type of event that has a built-in parameter, which is player. And with built-in parameters, you don't need to give any values. The event actually gives its own value for the parameter, depending on what it was listening for. So in this case, the built-in parameter is the specific player that gets added into the game. So now that we have the specific player, we can actually work on changing the shirt of the specific player. But in order to change the avatar of the player, we need to refer to their character, which you would normally get by typing in player.character. But if the player gets added, it doesn't necessarily mean that the character is added in yet, which is why instead of using player.character, we have to call another event called player.characterAdded. And just like the player added event, the character added event has an inbuilt parameter for the player's character that is loaded in. So now that we have reference to the character after it has fully loaded into the game, we can actually change the shirt of the character. You can see that the shirt is directly a child of the character. So all we have to do to refer to the shirt is by typing in .shirt as the child. And then in order to actually change what the shirt looks like, we have to refer to the shirt template property. And finally, we type in the asset ID for the shirt that you're looking for. And you can see that if I play the game, I actually spawn in with the shirt. There's a small problem when it comes to working with shirts. And the problem is some people actually play the game shirtless. And you can see that if I spawn in without a shirt, it actually gives an error because we're trying to change the avatar's shirt when it doesn't even exist. So in order to fix this, all we have to do is add an if statement checking if they have a shirt on, and if they don't, we give them a new shirt. So to do this, first let me create an if statement. Then for the condition, I'm going to put find first child to check if the shirt property exists or not. And when find first child cannot find anything, it usually returns nil. So we can use not to check if something is nil. And in that if statement, we'll create a new shirt by using instance.new. And then we just simply parent the shirt to the character. Now, if you use instance.new to create a shirt, the default name for it is clothing, so we actually have to rename it to shirt. Now you can see that if I join the game without a shirt, it gives me a new shirt and I still spawn in with the shirt I want. So yeah, I think the game is pretty much completed. Let's try to get some supporters. I did not mean to do that.
Yo, where am I? What is this? Is that your face on it? Our glorious leader? Dude, are you like narcissistic or something?
Do you like the shirt?
No, dude, it sucks. It's like so low quality and like I don't want to wear a shirt with your face on it.
You might hate me for what I've done, but in this society, you can only live a good life if you put down others. That's just the way the world works. I'm simply playing the game of life. Nothing less, nothing more.
Yeah, I think I'm done here. Let's move on to the next part of the tutorial. So far, we've learned about what functions are, how to write functions, how to add parameters, how to add default cases to the parameters, and also how to add returns to the functions. Now, for this final part of the video, I want to talk about something that's going to be a bit more complicated and more advanced, and that is using functions themselves as parameters. Now, I've created this simple function here called do something, and I'm also added a parameter that only accepts functions here. As you can see, the target parameter is who the function will be used on. And the way we use a parameter that is a function is by simply giving the name of the function, open bracket, closing bracket, and that's pretty much it. But since we want the function to do something to a target, we should also put the target here as a parameter. So I've recreated the burn script here from like a while back. And in order to convert this into a parameter for the function, I actually have to define this function as a variable. So now that I have the variable form of a function, I can just put burn here to represent the function. Then I put the target, let's say, is this part right here. So part. Now, you can see that if I run the game, I actually call the burn function indirectly without actually using the real burn function. And this is extremely powerful, especially when you're making complicated systems, such as adding skills into a game, where all your skills have a different function because they all do different things. In the next video, I'll be talking about loops, so yeah, bye.